Hi guys, welcome back. Today I think we're going to discuss attachment disorders.
Well, as a songwriter, what's the number one subject that you write songs about or that songwriters write songs about besides trucks and girls and things like that?
Heartbreak, probably.
Relationships, right?
Relationships, yeah.
Yeah. So, there's a Harvard study that was the longest study ever done really in psychology. It was 75 years they did this study. And what they did was they followed a group of boys one group that went to Harvard College at the time, and another group of boys that lived in a neighborhood around Harvard but were poor. And they followed them out, and they wanted to kind of see what happened with their life, and comparing these groups of boys that went to like the best school in the country and that were pretty wealthy to other boys that didn't really have an education. And they wanted to determine if, they assumed that the people that went to Harvard, they would be happier and healthier and, have all better lives. And they really extensively studied them, and not only studied them, but they interviewed their wives, their husbands, their wives, their children, their friends, everybody around them. And at the end of the study, what they found was that whether they went to Harvard, whether they made a lot of money, whether they were successful in business, whether they were relatively poor, none of that actually mattered. That the only thing that really made the difference as to whether their level of happiness and health later on in life was on the strength of their interpersonal relationships. It really all came down to their ability to form relationships and, and the families and their friends and all of that. And so when you look at that, all of that from a neuroscience standpoint really speaks to attachment. And there's a lot of research. It's probably one of the most researched things in all of psychology is attachment, and healthy attachment and unhealthy attachment. And it's pretty wild because actually the main studies that were done, one woman named Mary Main did most of these studies a long time ago, 70s, 80s, that you could assess an attachment style in a child by the time they were one.
Oh my
Meaning
God.
by the time they were one, their style of attaching to a male or a female for the rest of their life was already determined.
That's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So how did they figure that out?
Yeah, so they did this study called the Strange Situation Test. And if we can pull up, they came out with 4 different distinct attachment styles. If you want to be able to pull that up on the screen, we can look at that. So there are 4 different attachment styles that they were able to identify. The one that was most prevalent, fortunately, about 40% of the population, was what's called a secure attachment, which is, the type of relationship that is a healthy relationship where it's not perfect, but where you form a healthy bond between the parent and the child, and they enjoy being with each other, and the parent understands that building a relationship is important. And then there's what's called the anxious attachment. And this is one style that I look at as somebody who is more of a right brain dominant personality. This is somebody who is very nervous about relationships, or can be overly emotional and overly clingy. And this is a child that really has a lot of separation anxiety, and that, doesn't want to leave the parent. And really the parent also has a lot of their own stuff constantly going on in their head. And, even though they love the child, they may not be able to give them as much because they have their own emotions that they're dealing with all the time. And then there's what's called avoidant. To me, I look at this as more of a left brain style of attachment. And this is somebody that, attachment isn't really that important. They're kind of aloof. They're not really emotional. They're not touchy-feely type people. They, are not, very warm and fuzzy. And they look at, they don't really think attachment is all that important. And their children kind of are a little bit don't really reach out to them and looking for, for connection. They most learn early on that they have to fend for themselves. And then there's the disorganized, which is really what is found in about 15 to 20% of the population. These are people that, may have been traumatized as a child, that have neglect or abuse, or that really have more of a pathological type of attachment that, may perpetuate that type of trauma going down the road. So these 4 styles they were able to identify in 1-year-old children. And that formed the basis of all of their relationships with men or women, depending on, they could have different attachment styles with the mom versus the dad, or with one parent or one caregiver versus the other. So pretty fascinating stuff.
Okay. This is a lot. There's many layers of questions I want to ask about this. But okay, so you're saying that first of all of the attachment styles are kind of based on how your parents treated you as a baby, but then on top of that, if you become a more right brain person or a more left brain person, that can enhance that style. But if you're already like, okay, so then can it also affect the way your brain is developing because of how you're...
It can. That's another thing, especially in the disorganized one. There's a lot of research on something called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and that has shown that it can literally affect the way your brain grows and develops. But yeah, so it's, the way when I teach this, I look at it like, just think about a friend of yours, and is there somebody that who their relationships always end the same way because they're always, like, let's say, going for the same guy or the same girl, and
Yes.
there's a lot of drama all the time, and that person needs a lot of reinforcement. I'm pretty, I'm handsome, I'm smart. Do you love me? Do you love me? And that relationship ultimately may fall apart because they're too much, right? Mm-hmm. Or that person is also, so afraid or so sensitive that they might end a relationship early because they think this person is going to leave me anyway, right?
Yeah.
Do you know a bunch of people like that?
Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely.
Have you written songs about
this
people?
Town is full of them.
Right.
I might be one myself.
Yeah. So, that's one attachment style. That's the anxious attachment style.
And you're saying that's the more kind of right brain.
That's the more right brain dominant style, right?
I didn't realize that it could have it, depending on if you're right brain or left brain, that would affect your. But that makes sense. But is it like permanent? Like, can you change your attachment style, or it's like too embedded in your brain from being 1 year old?
This is the greatest
that's
question.
A lot of pressure.
That's a really good question you just asked, Al, because
thanks, Dad.
The fact is, there have been good studies showing that you can change it, but you have to be aware of it first. And this is the thing. Most people, obviously it's there from the time you're 1. And it might still develop a little bit later on, depending on your relationships and, what happens in your family and people like that. But that, we don't form conscious memories until we're 3. So most people have no idea that their attachment style was formed already, and that this is going to impact how they're going to view relationships with every man or woman that they meet in their life, right? Mm-hmm. And so even though you may say, well, you look at your parents and they got divorced and maybe it was because of this, maybe, one person was overly dramatic and overly emotional, or 2 of them got together and they were fighting all the time and whatever, and they're both right brain dominant people, and you may say, I'm never going to be like my parents and I'm never going to be that way. But your attachment style was based on your parents and it already formed by the time you were 1.
Yikes.
And it is actually shading every relationship you have. And you don't know it. But if you think back and say, okay, and this can even affect work. People get fired from work for the same thing over and over because they go in and they, are really, maybe they're so aloof, or nobody likes them, or everybody feels uncomfortable because they're not warm and fuzzy people, or they say things that might be, a little rude or sound a little rude because that person is such a left brain dominant person. and they don't mean it that way, but it comes off that way.
Yeah.
And they lose a job, or they may lose a job because they're always getting upset, or because they're running late all the time, or whatever. And so it impacts many different relationships. But yes, the answer is once you're aware of it, you can actually change it. Even the disorganized type, even the type with trauma. This is why, the cycle of trauma and abuse always perpetuates.
Yeah.
I mean, we know people, we can talk about even, people in our family that have been through things like that. And even though they don't want to do it and they're not going to, let that perpetuate, they do. And
Right.
why? Because it's so embedded in their subconscious, and especially the right brain. And, the right brain and its relationship in general to attachment is really well documented in research and literature. One of the people that I, have read a lot of work on is a guy named Alan Shore.
Oh yeah, you told me about it.
Yeah, I have that paper in there. There's one paper on relational trauma and the right brain and attachment. Yeah, this is just one paper. He's published many, many papers on that subject. And, that, again, there's a lot of research on this. And he also has come out with a recent book, which is very good. Now, he's the head of the Geffen Center in UCLA. There's a book called The Development of the Subconscious Mind, this book here, which is also a great book that's all about attachment and right brain development and right brain function.
It's only about right brain?
Pretty much. It's almost all about right brain development and attachment and how it, forms, how attachment is formed in the parents and when it's formed and the different parts of the brain that are related to that. So it's pretty cool stuff.
I guess, it all makes sense that, because just, obviously right brain people are more sensitive people. And so it makes sense that the way that they handle their relationships would be that way as well. It's just like kind of crazy that would all develop within your first year. Why is that? Like, if you're not even conscious, well, I guess it just said the unconscious brain, but like if you're not even able to consciously like understand those emotions that you're feeling, like you feel like you're being neglected or something like that, how is that even happening?
Well, it's a combination of things. One is that, it's built on your personality style, or what we call your cognitive style, which is, genetic, meaning that, it's a genetic trait that you get from your family. So if you have a very right brain dominant parent or both parents, you're going to more likely be right brain dominant individual in your personality style. Now, you may be different, and there are a number of different subsets of right brain dominance versus left brain dominance, but you will get that from your family. And so that's one thing, as well as if your parent has a certain attachment style, that's the way they're going to relate to you. So from the time you're a little baby, the mom especially, but the mom or the parent's right brain is talking to the baby's right brain and shaping it one way or the other. And so,
wow.
Yeah, it's just, that's why most moms around the world, 85% of the time, they breastfeed more. They favor the left arm.
Yeah.
Because it puts the baby's right brain in alignment with the mom's right brain so that they can communicate together. And so that communication is developing the right brain, is developing that connection, but also the right brain is responsible for attachment. The right brain is responsible for emotional regulation, being able to self-regulate or self-soothe. Initially, there's a co-regulation where the mom or the dad is soothing the child. But then after a while, the baby has to be able to do it on their own. And that is all, during the period of right brain development in this first 2 to 3 years.
So that last one, the disorganized one, yeah. I know, because I know you've told me about this in the past, but wasn't there like a study where it showed how kids like crawl to their parents or something like that you told me about?
Yeah, the study was actually, it's called the strain situation test. And what they did was they had, I'm going to make it shorter than it is, but they basically take the parents and their child, and with one parent and the other, they'll put them in a room. They walk in a room with a child, and the room it's a strange room. So it's called a strange situation test. And there's toys and things around the room. And the studies were done on basically 12-month-old kids, so 1 year. And what they did was they observed what happened when they first walked in. What did the child do? And then they take the parent out.
Okay.
And then they bring the parent back. And then they observe what happens when the parent leaves and what happens when the parent comes back.
Wow.
And then they went and they also observed them in the home to see what their dynamic was like. And the disorganized style was really interesting because what they found was that when they first came in the room, the child separated from the parent pretty easily. Went off and started playing with toys, and the parent left, and the child didn't really seem to notice.
This is the secure one.
This is the disorganized.
Oh, the disorganized
one. This
one.
is the trauma one. And then when the caregiver came back in, the child naturally went to go to the parent, but the parent. So attachment is starts with mammals, right? And so the whole idea of it is for a young baby to seek out a caregiver if they're in danger. Mm-hmm. So it all revolves around being able to know safety versus non-safety. And attachment is the idea that, if you're in danger, you go to your caregiver to protect you, right? Okay. And so in these children, their natural instinct was to go to the caregiver when they came back. But then, what if the caregiver is the danger, right? What if the person that's supposed to protect you is the one that's actually hurting you?
Right.
So what these children would do is they would go towards them, and then they would go away, almost like there was this biological problem they couldn't solve. Wow. Like, you're supposed to protect me, but if I go to you, you're going to hurt me.
Right.
And then they literally, many of them would freeze and go into this freeze response, because freezing is related to trauma. And they would just kind of collapse and literally almost split. And this can lead to what we call dissociation, which is really kind of like this split between your kind of left brain and right brain, and a disconnection from your body.
Wow. Okay. And that one's the hardest to get rid of?
That's the hardest, yes. That's the hardest. And that's why abuse tends to run in families. But it can be, and it has been shown that if you're aware of it, and you know that it happened, and you know that you have this attachment style, then you can change it. Now, in traditional psychology, they do it with, attachment therapy, but in my work, it also is related to the development of the brain, because attachment is supposed to happen at a certain stage of development. And if the brain is immature, if the brain literally hasn't grown to the level it should because it's kept in a more immature state, then the caregiver, the mom or the dad, can be giving all the right signals, but the child isn't picking up on it. They're not registering it. So they can have effectively an attachment disorder, but it's not because the parents did everything wrong. Most of the attachment work is really built around that the caregiver didn't do the right job, right? Like, they didn't give the right signals at the right time, or they gave them bad signals, or there was neglect and abuse, or they did give them the right signals, and that's why they developed a secure attachment. But that doesn't think about, well, what happens if the brain isn't developing the way it's supposed to? What if there's a delay? What if the left brain comes online first and the right brain, which is supposed to be the side of the brain that is attaching, is delayed or is prevented from developing? And we see a lot of people that have attachment issues, but come from great families and great parents, but they just weren't, they can't read those signals. Their brain just isn't picking up on it. Their right brain isn't picking up on it.
Wow. Yeah, because I feel like even as, I don't know, just more recently, the topic of generational trauma has been very popular, and talking about kind of healing the cycles of your parents and their parents and whatever. But I don't think anyone understands that it actually has to do with the way your brain developed as well, and that maybe your brain developed similarly to your parent, and that's and all that. So that's actually really, really interesting because I think, yeah, it's mostly just talked about as like an emotional wound that hasn't been healed or something.
Yeah, but when you listen to songs and things about that, and you start listening to it from a neurological perspective, like when you look at the songs that you've written and you talk about your emotions and you talk about your feelings, or that song I just played for you the other day, that Brandy Carlisle song.
Oh yeah, I was already emotional that day. I was
Yeah.
like, anything could have set me off, and he was like, just listen to this little lighthearted song. It was like, oh, I was hysterically crying in the car, but I mean, it was beautiful.
Yeah, Dear Insecurity. It's with another
Yeah,
young
we should. Well, I mean, yeah, that song
It's
sums up a
beautiful.
lot of what we talk about on this
Exactly.
podcast.
I'm sitting there going, this is such a right brain song.
I had like just gotten LASIK too. He was driving me to the airport, and I had my like big LASIK goggles on, and I was just like hysterically crying underneath them.
That's good. It helps
That
you
was
heal. The
attractive.
tears,
Yeah.
tears help the eyes heal quicker.
I know if I look like cross-eyed on this, my eyes are still a little blurry. So,
Well, you look good to us. That's for sure.
thanks. It's not no. You normally say, "Is your face hurt?" Because it's killing me.
So, the idea is that, again, when you're writing songs a lot about human drama and what happens in relationships. And, I look at it from a neuroscience perspective. What's the foundation of relationships? Where does it come from? What areas of the brain are responsible for it? When does it develop? Why doesn't it develop? And how do we change it? How do we do things that can change it? And I think music has a lot to do with healing that as well, because we've said before that the language of the right brain is really music. And I think yourself that you always said that writing songs is therapeutic for you, right?
Yeah, writing songs is very therapeutic for me. I mean, I think I understand myself the most when I write songs, but that's why I avoid writing those songs sometimes. But yeah. So I guess like when girls make the joke, like, I can change him, she would actually have to like probably change his brain.
You can't. First of all, you can't really change somebody if they don't want to be changed or if they don't think they need to be changed.
Yeah.
So one of the things we know, even with brain injury, a lot of it is whether they can be healed or not has a lot to do with, first of all, do they have the capacity to have some level of self-awareness of their own issues?
Yeah.
Right? And again, self-awareness is a right brain function. It emerges in the right brain in an area called the insula. And probably the most unique thing about human intelligence and consciousness is our level of self-awareness. And if somebody is not, lacks self-awareness, either because they've had trauma in the past or their right brain didn't develop so well, or, they've never looked at that, or they're afraid to look at it, or it's too painful to look at it, then, if you come at somebody from a judgmental standpoint and right away make them feel like, defensive, you're probably not going to be able to change them. But if somebody becomes aware of their style, so it's like if you're out there now, just think about it. If you're having trouble with relationships, right? If you say, I'm always in these serial relationships and they always end the same way. And why do I keep on going for the same guy? Or why do I keep on going for the same girl? And if you really think about it, and you might even be like, I don't want to be like my parents, but you think back and probably you're in a relationship that you may not have a secure attachment. You may have one of the either anxious attachment where you're overly emotional, or your fear of rejection is so high that you end a relationship early, or you're overly constantly need to be reinforced all the time, and that can be overwhelming. Or maybe you're too clingy and you may not be able to want to think of yourself that way, but that may be a one way, and you may push people away, not meaning to do that. And if you think about if your mother, your father were like that, probably one or the other was like that.
Yeah.
And if you become aware and say, yeah, okay, this is always happening to me over and over, and I want to be able to have a healthy attachment. Or the other is that, people think that you come off as very uncaring, or people think that you come off, as somebody who doesn't really have a lot of emotions, or
this is more
kind of cold.
Left side.
Yeah.
That you're talking about.
Yeah. And that people think, well, really care about a relationship. You don't care about me. You don't tell me that you love me. You don't kiss me. You don't hug me. You're not affectionate, and you're always losing a relationship because of that, because you're not giving enough. You may be highly intelligent on both sides. Your person may be, like we talk about all the time, the people that are most likely to have any sort of issue are people that are also some of the most gifted and that have incredible skills. So on one hand, they're people that have a lot to offer and they may attract a lot of people, but yet the relationships always go down because of their attachment style. And so if you think about that and you're listening to this, you may say, wow, that sounds like me. And it sounds like my mother was like that, or my father was like that. And I may, and you picked up on it really. And if your father was like that and you're a female, then chances are you may always be, choosing a guy that's like your father and you don't know it, and you form that same type of attachment style. So it really is about awareness. And when you have awareness, either with a good psychotherapist or with somebody who can do attachment, but then there's also, physically looking at the brain and the way the hemispheres work and integrate and come together.
You hear that, ladies? You want him to change. Tell him to go to a neurologist, not a therapist.
A functional neurologist.
Well, okay, since we're saying all these things, and I'm sure everyone's going to be like, this is me, this is me, this is the person I date, whatever. Like, what, if it is possible, what you're saying, it is possible to change these things, how would someone go about that or even begin to go about that?
Well, to me, the ideal situation is you work with someone who knows functional neurology, like, my work, because they can work with your brain and say, okay, do you have an imbalance? Do you have a deficit? Do you have a right brain or left brain, which is delayed, and your right brain or left brain is overly strong? And so therefore you don't have this balance, right? I mean, everything we're talking about, when we talk about imbalance in the brain, what we're really talking about is flow, that you should have a lot of flexibility. All of us should be able to, in certain situations, we rely a little bit more on our right brain. So other situations, we rely a little bit more on our left. And we have two different sides of our brain that specialize in different things. And we should be able to go back and forth. We have different emotions that we've talked about for right brain, left brain. And so we should be able to have this flow. But if there's an imbalance one way or the other, it blocks that flow. And so the flexibility isn't there. The ability to flow from one emotion to the other, you kind of get stuck in a certain way, and you're always in the same way in a relationship, and you kind of stuck. So physically, you may need to change the way your brain is working. And especially, again, if you're a very gifted, very talented, very bright individual, one way or the other, you're more likely to be stuck in a certain way. So physically looking at the brain and doing things to change that. But then also, a really good psychotherapist or counselor that can work with you and go back and explore, your parents and where you may have gotten this attachment style, someone who specializes in attachment or attachment disorders or relationship. And, by just openly discussing it and thinking about it and becoming aware of it, you then get to choose.
Yeah, I guess you can work on it. Yeah.
Right. What you want your relationships to look like. And this is where, I'm a big believer, like I've told you, is when you write things down. How many people actually have written down an example of what do you want in your partner?
Yeah.
What's
my
your
dad
ideal
had this,
partner?
he had this talk with me the other day. Yeah. Because, I've never really cared to be super intentional because I've always just been kind of in the wind with the people I date, which has worked out fantastically for me, let me tell you. But no, like all of my... He was like,
all of some really good songs, though.
Yeah. I'll make a whole podcast about
Taylor
all
Swift.
those people. It'll be like a serial killer podcast. But no, because he was like, everything that you like have ever wanted and dreamed of, you write down so specifically. But I've never like cared to, well, I guess because I was never like looking to intentionally either, but I never like cared to like write down all of the qualities that you want in someone. But as he was saying, that doing that would probably be a good idea if you're looking for a secure attachment.
Exactly. I mean, first of all, if you're raised in a good family, you have that. But then you have to look at, if you were raised in a family where there was a trouble with a relationship, or there was a lot of drama or negativity, and obviously how that may have impacted you one way or the other. But then you have to look at, yourself and your own brain and your own personality style and strengths and weaknesses, and do that work. But it also means that, the brain is goal directed. When you write something down, then your brain automatically goes into a search for it. You engage something called your default mode network. When you write something down and you put it out there intentionally, this is what I want. And now your brain basically goes into automated, I'm going to find it for you. And, that's how it works in general in life. And obviously, as we said, the number one, as I talked about that Harvard study starting the show off, the number one thing that defines success, happiness, and health later on in life is not money, it's not materialistic things, it's the quality of your interpersonal relationships. And so if you're going to spend any time setting goals and thinking about what do I want, and especially if you feel like, you may sabotage relationships a lot, not intentionally, but you don't know why. And because of things going on in your subconscious brain that go back to when you were 1 year old that you don't even know exist.
Wow. So okay. So if you have a secure attachment, would that mean those are the people with a more balanced brain when they're born?
Well, it means that one, that they were raised in a family where, the parenting style is somebody who, there's a good relationship with the child. The parent and the child seek proximity, but the child also feels safe going off on their own. And they every once in a while, they're going to have a fight or a disagreement or a fracture, and they repair it in a timely way. It's no perfect relationship, but it's a healthy, secure attachment. And yeah, that also, I think, is dependent on, are you developing your brain in the most optimal way? And is there an imbalance one way or the other? Because you may be raised in a great family and the parents do everything right, but yet you may have a certain attachment style that isn't the most conducive to healthy relationships. And that means you have to fix your brain.
Yeah.
Meaning that all the counseling in the world isn't going to change you if your brain is just stuck in one way and you don't have that flow.
Okay.
So
sorry, that I don't know why they're distracting, or my bad. Oh no, I know. I don't know. I was like that. Sorry, I don't mean to be. We were just distracting. How long are we? 33. 33? Okay. Okay. No, I was also just trying to think of where I wanted to take this, because I do think probably everyone's gonna want to know like what specific things you could do to fix that, but I guess it makes sense. Sorry guys. I was just I'm sorry. Sorry. Just being a little take care of it later. I was just being a little diva. No, I just was like couldn't focus. Probably due to my attachment style. Okay, so I mean all of it makes sense, and like we've talked about, I mean, I wonder, we should look into like, because people always talk about love languages, and there's like 5 different love languages, but some of them, I don't know what all of them are, but some of them are, gift giving, and it's like physical touch or whatever. But I guess that probably is dependent also on if you're a left brain or right brain person, if it's like nonverbal things or verbal things. Words of affirmation is like a big one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, right brain emotions and right brain relationships, which is the foundation, again, of attachment, is more nonverbal communication, touch, eye contact, tone of voice, body gestures.
Right brain, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is more, without words. How do you relate? You might be saying all the right things, but giving off all the wrong body signals for a right brain dominant person. You understand?
Okay.
And then a left brain person may not be so interested in your facial expressions or your nonverbal communication, but what do you say to me? What do you do? Like, what are your actions and the words? And that may mean a lot more to them than, nonverbal communication or your body posture or your position or things of that nature. And, that would make sense to me. So if we talk about, what is your love language, it means, what are the things that really connect you with somebody or that you're looking for in another person?
So if you have okay, so there's secure, there's anxious attachment. What was that?
Ambivalent.
Ambivalent. That's the more left brain one.
Yes.
So if you have like an ambivalent attachment disorder, are you looking for someone that has maybe a more anxious, like, are they a good combination with each other? Are you supposed to look for the opposite? What are they looking for?
That's a really good question. I think the opposites are going to have a tough time with one another, because you're going to get somebody that has one style, and what we
would probably have more balanced babies though.
If they stay together, yes. If they don't fight with each other and break up. Because if you get somebody that is somewhat ambivalent, well, you could argue either way. We were talking about people that you knew that, one person was shy and they tend to go out with shy people.
Yeah.
That may not work so well, if they both don't speak.
Yeah.
So on the other hand, they can relate to one another and they may have a similar love language, or they, pick up on certain cues. Whereas, you get somebody who's kind of ambivalent and isn't touchy-feely and doesn't really appreciate that and wants more, words and actions or, physical things, materialistic type of things. And then you get another person who really is all about, I need you to be affectionate. I need you to touch me. I need you to hold me. I need you to tell me that I'm beautiful, or tell me I'm handsome, or that you love me. And, those two people are going to have a tough time together, because neither one of them is really going to get from the other person. Now, they may be attracted to each other for various reasons because they are different. But from a long-term standpoint, I think that's going to be difficult. But, again, they can change if the relationship is important to them. And that's the whole thing. I think it just comes down to understand that we have different ways that we view the world, that we have different brains, that men and women's brains are different, for the most part, and that, people's brains are all different. And being aware of your own brain and how your brain is really the foundation of everything, your emotions, what you think, what you do, the goals you set, your personality, your relationships, all really revolves around that. So being aware of it and making a conscious intention. And I think that's kind of the whole point of why you wanted to do this podcast, because most people have no idea. Even, where was it? The other day, over Christmas, we were talking to somebody who was just saying, like, I don't know anything about my own brain. And, most people know about other organs in their body, but they don't know anything about their own brain, their own, personality. They just, they don't know that. And that's probably the single most important thing to understand about yourself and about your partner.
Yeah.
And your relationship.
I guess, no, it makes so much sense. I didn't even, when he said that we should talk about attachment disorders, because so many people have questions about it, I was like, all right, like, you lead the way, because I actually don't really know too much about it. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, if you guys didn't pick up on that. But it's like, I know all the stuff from being your daughter about, like, left brain and right brain differences, but I never associated it with also the way that you handle your relationships and what you need from other people. And that makes so much sense. And that actually, that's very helpful. And it is why we started this podcast, because, you're like so emotional and you're wondering why you need something from someone, or on the opposite, you're unemotional and you can't connect. And it's like, you're probably just wondering what's wrong with me, and nothing's wrong with you. It's just sort of accidentally, when you were 1 year old, you got a whole attachment disorder that you would have to have for the rest of your life. But but it can change, guys, and that's important.
Yes, but it's good for songwriters that there's, you know, you got a lot to write about when you're writing about relationships and broken hearts and, you
Yeah.
know, all of that. I mean, you know, you could look at any, especially, you know, go back to some Hank Williams or Johnny Cash songs, and there's a lot of attachment disorder language in there.
That's how I'm going to start writing. I'm going to be like, this is about my attachment disorder. Thank you for listening. Okay, wow. I think this is very, very helpful. Yeah, we're going to have to bring in like maybe some tools to show you guys, because I know we were saying that we can change these things, but obviously if you're not a functional neurologist or the daughter of one, it's not embedded in like just your everyday life. But yeah, there are like tools that you can use at home or just things you can follow to actually like start working on balancing your brain. And we have to do a whole episode showing you that for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of work now in a group of psychologists and psychiatrists that I really respect, who really look at a neuroscience perspective in the brain the way that I do. There's one book right now that I've been, you know, I just finished reading that I think is great. We also have that picture. It's called The Divided Therapist. There's a book where, you know, Alan Shore and a number of other people like Ian McGilchrist and
We love you, Ian.
Dan
We
Siegel
always
and
mention him on this.
Luke Cozzolino, and just people that I think are really outstanding. And they talk about a right brain psychotherapy approach. And even your Aunt Maura, who's a psychotherapist, was telling us that I gave her that book, and she was looking at somebody who she realized had more of a left brain deficit. And she was giving that person, you know, more left brain things to do to try to bring that left brain up. And another way of looking at it is, you know, right brain therapy is more, rather than, you know, traditional talk therapy, which is a little bit more directed towards the left brain. It's more listening therapy, empathizing, just feeling, just trying to feel.
You're saying trying right brain therapy, you mean like to enhance your right brain?
Right, or
If
to
you're
be able
more
to help
left brain
heal it
person.
in some way, is by, you know, trying to relate to it and try to, you know, listening to somebody and trying to empathize and understand them and really, you know, connect with their story rather than just talking to them and, you know, relating facts back and forth about, you know, what was your relationships like, but really just listening to them and thinking about and trying to connect and empathize with them. And I think that's a lot of what people can also do for themselves or in a relationship, is really, you know, listen to the other person, try to really empathize with them, try not to judge them, try to really connect with them and really learn their story. And in doing that, you know, you can really learn about, well, you know, where did their past relationships fail and what would they like to do better, and, you know, all those things. I think if you create a safe space and empathetic space, then, you know, that's when you can access that right brain more and be able to really, you know, understand attachment and relationships.
Okay. We got a lot of work to do.
Yep. But, you know, just keep writing songs, because I think writing songs about it. It's obviously, as we talked about from the very beginning, I think the greatest songs, I always tell you the songs that I love the most are the ones that make me cry, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when you're really accessing those right brain emotions, sadness or even joy is, you know, that's when you get those songs that are just kill you, like that Brandy Carlisle song, that, you know, Dear Insecurity song that made you cry the other day.
Everyone's going to start working on their brains now after this podcast, and no one's going to write sad songs anymore.
No, then we
just cured the entire town.
No, we need the sad songs. That's what heals people. I think that's why music is so powerful, because it's those sad songs that people connect with. Just like you said, that person came up to you last night at your show and said, "Are you going to release that song?" You know, and because I think a lot of people would really need to hear that song to heal. I mean, that's
and I didn't know. I had no idea if that song, because that was like one of the first times I ever played that live, and it was a pretty deep song. I had no idea if it was going to like reach anyone. So even just having like one person say that it helped them meant so much. Yeah.
There were so many people in the audience when you were playing that song. a lot of women in particular, I saw them like, oh my God, wow, that, what she's saying there, you were speaking to them. I just saw a lot of people in the audience really relating to that. And
There was a song about my ex-boyfriend sending me flowers from rehab, which obviously is a pretty lighthearted subject. But I made it work. But apparently it touched it, or I guess people could relate to it, so that was good.
Yeah, and that's the power of music. That's the beauty of music, is that, I mean, it's kind of a sad song, but it's a beautiful song, and people can relate to that. And that's the thing about Right Brain, is that people can relate to the words and the music, because that's the language of the right brain, where it may not just relate to just words. If someone's saying, oh, you have to do this or you have to do that, I think just one song can be really healing and therapeutic, because it speaks really to the right brain in an emotional way that just gets really deep.
Okay, well, I think that a lot of people after this episode will probably have a lot more questions about their attachment styles. So, as I've said in the past, we welcome questions, and I will keep them anonymous. If you want to send them into our Right Brain Instagram, you totally can, and we'll try to solve all your relationship problems for you.
Or at least, be able to let you understand it better. Because as we said, the key to a lot of this stuff is just being aware of it, and having a level of awareness and wanting to change things. Mm-hmm. And then you can.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of the brain. There's something called neuroplasticity, which, the idea that there were windows of opportunity where if you didn't do this in the first 3 years, you're screwed for the rest of your life. That's complete BS. That you can change your brain till the day you die. You can change your brain. You can change, even an injury, but that you can change it through intention and through certain actions. And that's the beauty of the human brain, is that it's the most changeable and most adaptable.
Okay.
Message of hope.
Yeah, beautiful way to end it. Okay, thank you guys for listening. Thanks for being my dad. And we'll see you next time.
I love you, honey.
Love you too.